One of the most common pieces of advice that is given to new ball python breeders is to not follow the crowd. But there are some major flaws with this saying, such as one, what exactly does it mean to not follow the crowd? And two, given the fact that new ball python breeders don't have all of the information and don't have all the context, how do they know that they are actually blazing a new trail rather than remaking the same mistakes that the hobby has previously learned from, but nobody is working those projects anymore? And last, is there a better way to not follow the crowd that isn't predicated on catching up and surpassing the industry leaders in terms of projects? Anyways, my name's Steven with Leviathan, and let's get to it.
So we were in a group chat a little while ago, and one of the members of that group chat received a snake that they had purchased, and the snake was in a large snake bag that had just been kind of cut in half and zip tied at the top. Cut into thirds and zip tied at the top and the bottom. And it was not, in their opinion, the best experience for receiving an animal. And it got us kind of talking about ways that we could stand out a little. And Steven said, it's probably not that hard to sew your own snake bags. So he promptly made me figure out how to sew some snake bags.
First topic is, what exactly does it mean to not follow the crowd in the context of the ball python breeding industry? And generally, I think that this advice is being given to new breeders when they are trying to chase a really popular gene or a really popular combo that's hot at that specific time. And the reason why this is not a good idea is, let's say that you have a gene that is super popular, super in demand. When the hype is so strong for that gene, a bunch of people are going to be buying into it. And then they're going to be raising up their babies that they bought in that project, and 2 to 3 years later, they are going to be producing animals in that project. But the issue with this is that, generally speaking, when there is really strong hype for a gene or really strong hype for a project, all of the people who are interested in that project are buying it when the hype is the highest. So if you buy in as a new breeder when the hype is the highest, what will end up happening is, by the time that you're able to produce babies in it, the prices will have dropped dramatically because there's not as much demand for it, because it's not the hot new thing, and a lot of the people who were interested in that gene have already bought their animals, and you aren't going to be there ready to sell them another animal in that project because they already have their own. So if you're following the crowd and you're chasing the trends, what tends to happen is that you're buying your animals at really high prices, and then when it comes time to sell the babies, they are significantly lower than what you bought in, and this can discourage new breeders quite a bit, to the point where they get out of the ball python breeding hobby entirely. So, the obvious implication is that you shouldn't buy things that are really hot and have a lot of hype behind them, and instead you should be looking at things that are overlooked by the rest of the ball python breeding hobby. And often what happens when this is going on is that the new ball python breeders are looking at morphs that don't have very much representation on Morph Market. And while there can be genes that people are sleeping on, it tends to be, in my opinion, if the morph has been established for 10, 15, 20 years and there's barely anybody working it, the reason why is that there hasn't been a combo that has been found that is going to wow the entire market. And that doesn't mean that there isn't a combo that exists in that project, but it's going to be really difficult to find it. And even if you do find that amazing combo with an underworked gene, as a new ball python breeder, you are going to have to champion that gene. You're going to have to champion that project, and if you're not prepared to have a strong marketing presence within the ball python breeding hobby, you might make something amazing, but nobody knows about it because you don't have a presence and you don't have a way to disseminate the information and the animal that you had produced. there are certain genes that are not worked very much anymore because there are issues with them. And one of the most common examples of this is the desert morph, which is an absolutely beautiful morph, and it helps the animals age really, really well, but the fact that the females are infertile completely destroys its viability in the ball python breeding projects, because you can essentially only use the males, and then once you produce females, those are at a dead end. So even though desert isn't really worked that much, if somebody new came in and decided to make desert the focus of their entire ball python breeding projects, they're probably not going to do very well regardless of what combos they produce.
So right now this one's cut out, I think it's 11 by 14, and we've just been kind of experimenting with different sizes of bags. And what I do is I sew along 3 sides. I start at the top, and then when I get here I kind of come like 3/4 of the way up, because we're doing them as drawstring bags. But what I do is I stitch all the way around, and then I go back over and I do my overcast stitch to finish the edges.
The last problem with this is that in order to not be chasing the crowd, and in order to not follow what everybody else is doing, you have to be at the forefront of any project that you are working, or at least try to be. Because if you are not making brand new combinations of genes, you are inadvertently always going to be falling behind, because there's going to be somebody else who already did it before you. So in order to work at that level, it takes so much money, it takes so much time, that for a new ball python breeder, it's not really doable. Maybe you might get lucky and get one clutch that is at the leading edge of a project. But given the breadth and depth of the collections that the industry leaders have, even if you surpass them on one clutch, it's very likely that they will far surpass anything that you can do in the next 5 clutches that they produce in that project. So if you are trying to compete with people who've been doing it for 20, 25 years and are already leading those projects, it's going to be an uphill battle unless you have hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest in the animals in order to get yourself at that same level.
So the finished edges, the like overcast stitch, is something new that I'm trying because I think it looks a little nicer than just the seam. And then like the kind of frayed edges, I think this looks really nice. This is just the inside of the bag though. It is more time consuming for sure to do the finished edges, so I don't know if it's necessary, but I think it looks nice. So the next step for us is the drawstring, and to do the drawstring we just go ahead and flip over the top of the bag, and we go ahead and we thread the drawstring through before sewing, and then sew this into place.
So I know that this is seeming like it's doom and gloom and that there is no hope and there is no way for a new breeder to not follow the crowd. I don't think that that's true, but you have to look at it from a different perspective, and in my opinion, the new breeder can't be approaching it from the perspective of the animals, even though they should be trying to make the best animals that have never been hit before, but instead you can leverage other aspects of your life and other skill sets in order to establish yourself as somebody who is unlike anybody else in the reptile hobby. As a personal example, when we got into the ball python breeding hobby, I thought that there was a ton of amazing content about morphs, about the animals, about the hobby of breeding reptiles entirely. But I did not think that there was very much business-focused content at the time, and there certainly wasn't any content that was solely focused on marketing a reptile business. And since my day job, my professional career is in marketing, I felt that that was a way that I could leverage the skill set that I already had and translate it into the reptile hobby and make stuff that nobody else was doing. And at least in my opinion, I think that it's worked really well for us so far on establishing Leviathan as its own brand within the reptile sphere. But it doesn't have to be about marketing. You can leverage lots of different skill sets, such as if you had a background in engineering and you were able to develop a new system for reptile racks by creating these amazing inventions that improve the quality of life for the animals and the breeders, that alone could put you in a different level in the ball python breeding world. In addition, I think that what we have seen in the last couple of years with shed testing is a prime example of people who took a skill set that was outside of breeding reptiles, applied it to the reptile hobby, and are now industry leaders. And this goes for Rare Genetics Incorporated, it goes for shedtesting.com. There are amazing things that they were able to bring into the hobby that helped out everybody, and it has catapulted their brands to the top of the industry.
The one thing that I have to be careful of is not to sew the drawstring into the bag. So if I pin it and keep the drawstring up above the pin and make sure to sew below the pin, I don't have to worry about sewing the drawstring.
So my advice is to find something, whether that is a professional skill that you have for your day job, or maybe it's another hobby that you are interested in, and see if you can figure out a way to translate it into the reptile hobby so that way it can help yourself and it could help other people. Again, it can make you stand out from the crowd because you're not doing what everybody else is. If you are able to establish yourself in one of these other areas, it's very likely that when people think of your brand, they will instantly be able to describe what you and your brand do differently than everybody else. But if you don't have anything that is different than anybody else, it's very likely that you are going to get lost in the sea of other breeders, because there are quite a bit of other reptile breeders right now in 2025, and I think that it is imperative that you are able to stand out from the crowd, but trying to do it in the way that it is generally talked about is probably going to result in more headaches than it is going to result in successes. Anyways, we hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, please don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe, but we will see you next week.